The film opens with the arrival of the biggest drug cartel boss at the airport in Colombia, after which he travels with his heavy security detail to his massive mansion. Upon arrival, he changes his clothes and goes down to the pool. While swimming, he spots a watch at the bottom that looks just like his, so he dives down to get it. Suddenly, a person wearing a diving suit ambushes and strangles him. The boss tries to fight back but ultimately gives in to death. Cleverly, the killer begins moving the body from underneath to make it look like he is still swimming, so the guards won't suspect anything, then quickly slips into a side room and changes his clothes. At that moment, the maid sees the boss motionless and starts screaming, causing the guards to rush in as the place turns into complete chaos. The killer exploits the situation, walks out of the room in servant's clothes, and successfully makes his way out of the mansion, while everyone assumes the boss suffered a heart attack. Afterward, the killer changes his clothes, takes his bag, and runs toward the bridge. As an oil tanker boat passes underneath, he quickly jumps from the bridge and clings to it to escape the area. Afterward, we see the killer, whose name is Arthur, arrive in America, and we learn that he works for a secret organization whose goal is to eliminate anyone who disrupts their interests. Here, he takes a boat to go to his isolated house away from people. When he enters, he opens his operations wall, which displays all the photos and information about the drug lord, as well as the escape routes. Arthur's secret to distinction is making every assassination look like an accident or a natural death. The next day, Arthur leaves his house and takes the boat to go to a restaurant. Here, Harry enters in a wheelchair. He is Arthur's boss at work, and he tells him that he has become like a machine, which is why he assigns him the difficult operations. Afterward, Arthur asks him about his son, Steve, and we learn from Harry that he was fired from work after he almost beat his colleague to death, and he felt disappointed in him. Arthur then leaves with his payment for the operation. A few days later, Arthur is assigned a new mission, but the surprise is that the target is his friend and boss, Harry. He is completely shocked, and when he contacts the specialist to verify, the information turns out to be correct. So he goes to meet Dean Sanderson, the head of the organization, accepts the contract, and they send him a private jet.
Later, President Dean meets with Arthur and drops a bombshell. He wants Harry dead. Dean explains that a 5-man team was recently sent to eliminate a high-profile target in South Africa, but the mission failed, and the entire team was killed. Arthur is shocked to learn that one of those agents was his close friend, Sebastian. Dean reveals there was a mole inside, and only 2 people knew about the operation, himself and Harry. Exploiting Harry's vulnerabilities, Dean reminds Arthur that Harry is aging, buried in debt from a costly divorce, and dealing with his reckless son. He shows Arthur a bank statement proving Harry received millions in suspicious transfers, the latest just 2 weeks ago. Arthur tries to intercede, offering to talk to him, but Dean insists the hit is non-negotiable. Harry is a liability. Dean chose Arthur specifically because he is the closest to Harry and can make him die quietly. He gives Arthur a strict 48-hour deadline before independent hitmen are sent. Torn between loyalty and friendship, a conflicted Arthur returns home. That night, while Harry is at his office, Arthur calls to warn him, "Dean's men are coming for you. Take your essentials and grab a pair of scissors." Harry cuts the main power lines with the scissors, plunging the floor into darkness and disabling the security cameras. Arthur guides him over the phone to the parking garage, but when Harry arrives, he finds his car window shattered. Suddenly, Arthur steps out of the shadows. Harry instantly realizes the trap. Arthur wasn't helping him escape. He set him up to make his murder look like a botched carjacking. Remarkably calm, Harry draws his own gun and fires 3 shots into his car to back up the carjacking story and protect Arthur's cover. He surrenders the weapon to Arthur, who asks in disbelief, "Why didn't you just kill me?" Harry delivers a heartbreaking truth. "If I don't die by your hand, they will keep sending others until I'm dead. I'd rather it be you." Holding back tears, Arthur pulls the trigger, shooting his mentor through the heart. At Harry's funeral, his estranged son Steve is grieving. Arthur approaches to comfort him. Regretting his distant relationship with his father, Steve asks Arthur for a ride to Harry's house. Looking through his father's military memorabilia, Steve shocks Arthur by revealing that Harry's bank accounts are empty and the bank is foreclosing on the house. Steve vows vengeance, expressing disgust that anyone could ruthlessly execute a man confined to a wheelchair. Overwhelmed by intense guilt, Arthur leaves. Left alone, a furious Steve starts drinking and firing gunshots into the walls. Later that night, while sitting in his car, a thief holds him at gunpoint. Fueled by pent-up rage, Steve overpowers the thief and beats him brutally, projecting his anger onto the criminal. Just as Steve draws his gun to execute him, Arthur appears from the shadows. Arthur disarms Steve, frightens the thief away, and sternly warns Steve, "You need to control your actions and watch your next moves."
The next day, when Arthur finishes shopping, Steve sees him, approaches him, and tells him that he was right about what he said to him last night, explaining that he knows about the nature of his work. He informs Arthur that his father used to be his boss at work, that Arthur owes him, and that Arthur is now forced to bring him into the business with him. Arthur remains silent, ignores him, and leaves. At night, Arthur thinks about Harry and feels guilty for what he did to him, so he decides to bring Steve into the business with him. He calls Steve and sets an appointment to meet him at 7 in the morning. Steve goes and meets Arthur at a dog kennel. Arthur tells him about the job and how he commits murders to make them look like natural accidents. Steve replies that he can do this and has seen it before, but Arthur responds responds, "No, you haven't seen anything yet." Arthur then tells him the complete details of his life since birth, leaving Steve shocked. Meanwhile, Arthur asks to adopt a dog and leaves with Steve. Upon their arrival, Arthur tells him that working with him requires a certain mental state, saying, "Thinking about revenge makes you do stupid things." Arthur asks him to take the dog for walks and make it his best friend, then leaves after informing him of their next meeting time. When they meet, Arthur tells him to take the dog with him, sit in a specific cafe he told him about, and order a black coffee, repeating this routine 1 day a week for 3 consecutive weeks. After that, Arthur teaches him how to use weapons professionally, until Steve reaches a level where he surpasses Arthur. Not only that, but he also asks him to review the causes of death of many people, to learn how to make murders appear natural. Later, while Arthur is fixing his car, which took him 2 years to repair, he tells Steve that it is time to move him to the second level of training. He takes him to a certain man who was his target. He deceives the man, strangles him, and then hangs his body to make it look like he accidentally strangled himself while watching pornographic movies. Steve witnesses everything, as Arthur's goal is for Steve to learn practically. After Arthur and Steve leave the house of the man they killed, they return together to Arthur's house. There, Arthur opens the operational wall and informs Steve that the man he just disposed of used to sell weapons to all the men who commit crimes and fight the police. Then he gives Steve a file containing information and a photo of the person Steve will be responsible for eliminating. He tells him that he will go to the cafe and provides him with a toxic substance to get rid of him easily, warning him not to go anywhere with him and reminding him that he must dispose of him by putting the toxic substance in his glass. Steve goes and the man approaches him and asks if he lives alone. Steve tells him that he moves from one place to another and is not settled. At one point when the man leaves, Steve pulls out the toxic substance but hesitates to put it in, changing his mind in an attempt to find out more about the man. When the man returns, Steve tells him that he must go. As Steve walks out, the man catches up with him and asks him to come to his house, so Steve goes with him. The man makes advances on Steve, trying to have sex with him, just as Arthur had previously told Steve he would. Steve tries to hold himself together and illusion him into thinking that he wants this. Afterward, Steve attacks him, but the man initially overpowers Steve because he is very large. However, after a bloody battle, Steve manages to stab him several times until he kills him. Following this, he goes to Arthur, who tells him, "I told you before not to make things hard on yourself." They then go to a bar together. Arthur's girlfriend arrives and leaves with him, while Steve leaves in the company of another girl. Arthur leaves the dog with his girlfriend, who thanks him and tells him she is going to name it Arthur. The next day, Arthur goes to the airport and receives a package. He opens it to find an amount of money, a phone, and files for a new operation. He calls the boss, Dean. Dean tells him that the operation must be executed as soon as possible. Arthur tells him that he needs more time for planning, but Dean informs him that the operation must be carried out with the utmost speed, and Arthur agrees. Afterward, Dean tells him that he violated the agreement by having someone else execute one of his operations. Arthur tells him that the agreement was with Harry, not with him, and that this does not concern him. Dean reiterates the necessity of executing the operation quickly. Afterward, Arthur returns and begins preparing for the operation with Steve. It turns out that their next target is a man who claims to be the Messiah sent by God. He has widespread popularity and makes a lot of money through television appearances and his own churches. They plan to inject him with a high dose of adrenaline so that the death appears natural. Indeed, they travel to Chicago, where they scale the massive building where the target and his men are located. They plant cameras to monitor him, then enter from the roof through the air conditioning vent, moving inside the walls. Later, they notice that the man is using a narcotic substance, which would counteract the effect of the adrenaline if ejected. Realizing they must change the plan, they wait until he is left alone, then sneak in and strangle him before hiding. Afterward, one of his men enters and their plan succeeds. However, a metal piece soon falls from Arthur and Steve, making the men realize someone is hiding behind the wall. Steve and Arthur open fire on them, and a gunfight breaks out between them and the men. After that, they jump from the building using ropes, but before they reach the ground, the ropes get jammed. They enter one of the floors in the building, change their clothes, and blend in with the crowd to exit the building normally. Arthur asks Steve to book a flight through Midway Airlines, while he will catch a flight from O'Hare Airport, planning to meet back at the house a day later. Arthur goes to the airport, and while waiting, he spots Sebastian, the man who was supposedly killed in the South Africa operation, as the boss, Dean, had previously told him. Arthur realizes that Dean lied to him, so he pursues the man. Upon discovering that Sebastian faked his death, a fight breaks out between them inside a bus that Sebastian was supposed to board. Arthur overpowers him, throws him out of the bus window, and leaves the scene. After that, Arthur returns, but before reaching his house, he engages in a fight with unknown men and manages to kill them. He takes a phone from one of them and makes a call. His boss, Dean, answers, revealing that he was the one who sent them. Dean tells him, "This team is the best team I have, but don't worry, I will send you more to kill you." Arthur responds, "No need for that, I am coming to you." Afterward, Steve calls Arthur, as men sent by Dean had reached him and ordered him to call Arthur. Steve eliminates all of them. Arthur hears the sound of gunfire and tells Steve that he is waiting for him at the house. Arthur arrives home and asks Steve to put all the equipment and weapons into the boat. While Arthur is searching through Dean's files to find a way to reach him, Steve finds his father's gun among the weapons. He takes it and begins to suspect Arthur. They head to one of Dean's men and threaten to kill his family, so the man reveals the location of Dean and his men. Arthur then calls Dean. Dean tells him that Harry's death earned him $50 million, and if Arthur wants his $10 million share, he is ready to send it to him. When Arthur refuses, Dean tells him that he won't be able to reach him, but Arthur replies, "I have already reached you." Realizing that Arthur has arrived, Dean orders his men to move and exits the building. Steve forces the passengers out of a bus and hijacks it, while Arthur takes a car, and they block the path of Dean and his men's convoy. Then, Arthur drives a large truck and crushes Dean's car. Afterward, we see Dean covered in blood inside the wreckage of the car. Arthur and Steve shoot him together, get rid of him, and then leave. Steve asks Arthur, "What is the plan now?" Arthur replies that they will change their lives, names, and jobs. Steve asks Arthur if he has ever killed someone he knew before, and Arthur answers, yes. Steve asks him, "Did you feel regret?" Arthur responds, "After the killing, I felt regret later." They stop at a gas station. Steve gets out and fills the car with gas, then steps away from it and fires a bullet at the car. The car explodes with Arthur inside. Steve goes to Arthur's house and opens the operational wall, but he finds nothing. He leaves and gets into Arthur's car. After driving a short distance, he finds a note next to him from Arthur saying, "Steve, if you are reading this note right now, then you are dead." While Steve laughs and mocks the note, the car explodes with him inside, and Arthur's house explodes entirely as well, as Arthur had prepared all of this in advance. Then we discover that Arthur managed to survive, as he jumped from the car at the very last moment and got into another car, and the movie ends. Like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.